No slides tonight, I'm sorry. But I had other things to do, like play with Noah. I know it's a hard thing to have to sacrifice yourself for, but one day, if you have a grandson, you'll understand. Would you open in prayer with me? Father God, as I present this message this evening, help each one of us to have open hearts and open minds. Help the word to sink in and help us to learn from it. Help us to learn what you have to tell us through your word. Thank you for each and every person here. Help us to honor you with our service. In Jesus' name, amen. So imagine, for some of you military guys, I apologize ahead of time, but you won't have to imagine very much. Imagine that you're 19 years old, in the prime of your life. You have a driver's license and you have that freedom to go do whatever you want to do. You have that special somebody that you hang out with and you go and do stuff with them. You have all these plans that you've made, and then one day you wake up and that's all changed. Now you're someplace where you never thought you'd be. That special somebody that you hang out with is now a picture in your wallet. And you're in a foreign country and you're doing things to protect some group of people. When you're out in those types of situations, in the job that I did a lot of patrols in what's known as the Sunni Triangle in Iraq. And when you go out on patrol, somebody always has to be in the front. So as you are in the front, that means you're the point man. Everybody is relying on you to do the right things. They're following behind you, and they're making sure, or they want to make sure that you know what you're doing. They want you to look for tripwires, for booby traps, for unexploded munitions, for lots of different things, snipers in a building. And on this day, unlike any other day, you get out of bed and your patrol leader looks at you and say, today, you're the point man. You have never done it before, and so it weighs heavy on your shoulders. You get a knot in your stomach. You start to sweat because, wow, I've never done this before, but now everybody's relying on me. I'm the focus of attention. And so you go out into this area that you know is what we would call a red zone. That means everybody's hostile. There's nobody in this area that you will come in contact with that is friendly to you. You are not liked. Not only are you not liked because you're an American, you're not liked because you're a soldier, and you're not liked because we don't want you here. And so you start your patrol, and as you're going through different buildings, as you're going through swamps and you're going through areas where they make palm dates, and you're finding weapons caches, and you're having to take care of some of the enemy people. Things don't always go the way you'd like them to. And so there's people around you that is getting hurt. There are people that will not see the light of day again, and you're at fault because you're the point man. So let's just change the scenario a little bit because that lets it a little too close to home. These words are not in a book. It just gives me a note where I'm going to start. So we're going to change the scenario, and again, you're the point man. You might be the point man, or you might be the point woman. You might be the husband, or you might be the son. You might be the wife, or you might be the daughter. And on today, you are the point man, and you're going out to war. This is very difficult because it's the first time. And as you enter the red zone where the enemy is waiting for you, you look over your shoulder, and instead of seeing your fellow soldiers behind you, you see your wife or your son or your daughter or your grandchildren. Your wife is holding the little baby. Your son is crying, and she's trying to get him to stop crying so that you can avoid the enemy because you do not want to come in contact with him. Your survival depends on each member of your family doing exactly what you tell them to do. because you're the point man or point person? Would you be motivated to take more care of your family because of the situation that you're in? Because you're in a war. Today we are in a war. We are in a war in a world that does not care about the family values. The chaos of America's culture is like leading a small patrol through enemy-occupied territory. So how do we fix this? How do we go into this territory that we walk into every day, day in and day out? We use what we have. I was out on my trap line with the young Torres, and he's like, "How do you know all this stuff?" I said, "I learned it by practicing it and getting better at it. So you can learn things by reading and by doing." Moses is one of those people that when we talk about him, he's this great guy at the end. But what about the beginning? In Exodus 4, starting in verse 1, and we'll go through verse 5. Then Moses said, "What if they will not believe me or listen to me? What I say, for they may say, 'The Lord has not appeared to you.' The Lord said to him, 'What is that in your hand?' And he said, 'A staff.' Then he said, 'Throw it on the ground.' So he threw it on the ground, and it became a serpent. And Moses fled from it. But the Lord said to Moses, 'Stretch out your hand and grasp it by the tail.' So he stretched out his hand and caught it. And it became a staff in his hand, that they may believe that the Lord, the God of your father, the God of Abraham, the God of Isaac, and the God of Jacob has appeared to you." So what did Moses have? Moses had a staff, but before he even got there, he made all these excuses why he couldn't do something. Aaron had a staff, and we can read about Aaron's staff as we look at Exodus 8, 5 through 6. So I'll turn over there real quick. Exodus 8, starting in verse 5. Then the Lord said to Moses, "Say to Aaron, stretch out your hand, and with your staff over the river, over the streams, and over the ponds, and make frogs come up on the land of Egypt." So Aaron had a staff. He used what he had. Sometimes just a little bit that we know, God can use what we have. Now, I didn't ask these people if I could talk about them in the sermon tonight, but I'm going to, and if you want to talk to me later about it, you can. How many of us in this congregation have had a problem at our home? Maybe the boiler didn't work, or a door wasn't quite square, and we needed help. Who did we call? "Hello, Gene, I need some help." And Gene would say, "Okay, I'll come help you." How many of us own them little tiny 4-footed friends that we hang out with and everything's great and wonderful until it's not? And who do we call? We call Terry and say, "Hey, let me help you." Or how many of us have a project that we're working on and we know someone who's an engineer? I didn't ask Mike about this, but one time Mike came over to a house we were working on, and this was like a typical Alaska house. It was a trailer house that was connected to an A-frame that was connected to a lean-to, which wasn't really a lean-to, it was something else. And so we called Mike and said, "Hey, can you come help us figure out if this place is level?" Never seen anything like this before. Mike shows up with this water and a tube, and he's laying the tubing out, and he pours water, and he says, "Nope, not level." Okay. But he knows how to do that stuff. I would have never figured that stuff out, but he was able to figure that out by using some measuring sticks and some water, and he could say whether or not it was level or not. There are people in our congregation that can do things that I cannot do, and I can do things that you can't do. I remember when I retired from the school district, there was a young lady here who has now since moved to the Banana Belt. That's what we call everything down there, right? Named Leslie. And she said, "Can you tell me your schedule, what it's going to look like so you can fix my car when it breaks down?" So we use what we have to help others. When we think about what we have, we need to not make excuses. We need to use what we have for the purpose that God has intended us to use it for. King David, we know if we look at him, as his final story, it says he was a man after God's own heart. But in 1 Samuel 17, 40 through 50, it talks about King David, or David, as he goes to visit his brothers. He's taking them some food, and when he gets there, there's Goliath out there, and Goliath is this monster of a man, and he's got a huge spear, and he's got a huge helmet, and he's got a huge shield, and he is taunting God's army, and everybody is afraid of him. And so he's told here, Saul says, put this armor on. And it doesn't fit David. He said, I can't use that armor. That doesn't work for me. And I'm paraphrasing a little bit. And so he goes down and he picks up 5 smooth stones. And he challenges Goliath. And Goliath says, you send this dog out here to attack me. And he puts the rock in his sling and he whips it around and he throws it. It hits him dead square between the eyes. And now there's no more Goliath. Goliath seemingly to be this person who was undefeatable, who was someone that most of us would never walk up to. In my vocabulary from where I grew up, I would say, rather than mess with Goliath, I'd rather slap a mountain lion inside a telephone pole with a handful of porcupine needles than face this guy. But not David. David said, let's go, we can handle this. So instead of dwelling on the things he couldn't do, I can't wear this armor, I don't have a spear, I don't have a shield, I don't have a helmet, I'm just going to go out there with what I got on, because this is what I know. So many of us know what we know, and we know how to do things, and we can pass that on. God is asking us to use the talents we have to help others. Instead of dwelling on disadvantages, there was this guy that I really like to talk about, and his name was Gideon. I think sometimes we give doubting Thomas a bad rap because God said stop doubting, so we always call him doubting Thomas. But maybe we should call this guy doubting Gideon, because Gideon doubted everything. So imagine sometimes us as young people, we're a little bit impetuous and we might know everything, or we're afraid to do things because trying new things is difficult. And so Gideon is told in Judges chapter 6 that he needs to do something for God's people. That they rebelled against God, and God was not happy with them. And so God told Gideon, this is what you're going to do. And Gideon was like, I don't know, but he was called a man of valor, a mighty man of valor. But he wasn't valorous in his own eyes. So he went and he did what God asked him to do. But he doubted it because he said, before I do this, I'm going to lay this fleece on the ground, and I want you to make the top side wet and the bottom side dry. Then he said, I want you to make the bottom side wet and the top side dry. And then one more time, I want you to do one more thing for me. And then he realized that, yes, this was the angel of God talking to him. And so he comes up with this strategy because he's supposed to go and deal with the Midianites. And so he gets an army together. So in Judges 6, it starts out with, then the sons of Israel did what was evil in the sight of the Lord. And the Lord put them into the hands of the Midianites for 7 years. And so they were worshiping their gods. They were participating in the things they did. And they weren't very happy. God was not happy about it. In verse 11, it says, then the angel of the Lord came and sat under the oak that was in Ophrah, which belonged to Joash. His son Gideon was beating out wheat in the wine presses in order to save it from the Midianites. So it didn't matter what the Israelites did, the Midianites came and took it from them. And so Gideon was told that he needed to go and destroy their altars, and he said, just like I would say. I was talking to Ken Nyquist about this last night, and I said, if someone told me, go out there to Ken's 1975 Ford plow truck and stick a knife in each one of his tires, I'd be like, I ain't doing it during daylight, because if I do, it ain't going to be good for me. And he laughed and said, you bet that's not going to happen very good. All right, so he asked some questions, and when it got dark, he went and did it, and he did what God told him to do. In chapter 7, he's told that he needs to make an army. So he gets an army, and he gets an army of 32,000 men. And he said, yes, this is going to work. And God said, no, I'm sorry. That's not going to work for me, because you got too many men. So he said, well, if you don't want to be here, you can go home. And so about 10,000 of them left because they don't want to be there. And God said, no, you still got too many. Then God said, nope, you still got too many, until he got down to 300. And he said, now you got enough, and I'll be with you. And even though God had already proven so many things to him, he said, I still don't got it. He said, well, what do you have? He said, go down and listen to what they have to say, and now you have what you need in order to accomplish the mission that I sent you on. Instead of dwelling up what we don't have, we need to look at what we do have. Now, if you have a four-wheeler and it's not running properly, I do understand that we have a member of the church that has retired from the profession of being a doctor and has opened a radiology clinic, especially for broke-down four-wheelers. And he has an extra large garage so he can fix extra large four-wheelers. His first initial may be M and his last one may be B. Make sure you talk to Household 6 before you take it over there. Okay, but with talents we want to use. So we're going to zip to the New Testament, not to the First Testament. And Jesus is talking here, and he's talking to those disciples that he has, and he's telling them, got the multitude there, so we're being John 6, verse 5 through 13. He's got the multitude there, and he says, we need to feed these people. And the disciples are talking amongst themselves, and of course, they're having problems with this because they don't have enough money, they don't have enough food. There's no way they could feed these people. We need to send these people away so they can get their own food. Starting in verse 5. Therefore, Jesus lifted up his eyes, and seeing that a large crowd was coming to him, said to Philip, where are we to buy bread so that these may eat? This he was saying to test him, for he himself knew what he was intending to do. Philip answered him, 200 denarii worth of bread is not sufficient for them, for everyone to receive a little. One of his disciples, Andrew, Simon Peter's brother, said to him, there is a lad here who has 5 barley loaves and 2 fish. But what are these for so many people? Jesus said, have the people sit down. Now there was much grass in that place. So the men sat down in numbers about 5,000. Jesus then took the loaves, and having given thanks, he distributed them to those who were seated. Likewise also of the fish, as much as they wanted. And when they were filled, he said to his disciples, gather up the leftover fragments so that nothing will be lost. I'm going to stop right there real quick. So can you imagine that all of a sudden we have the lectureship in Fairbanks and everybody goes to Andy's house for dinner? What's she going to do? And Jesus shows up and says, don't worry, Andy, just pull out what you got. And so she pulls out what she got. And there's enough for everybody. And when everybody's done eating and everybody's filled to their satisfaction, it says, so they gathered them up and filled 12 baskets with fragments from the 5 barley loaves which were left over by those who had eaten. use what we have, not what we don't have. So what do we have? We're not like the Joneses, hopefully. We don't have to have everything. But what do we have? We have time. Ephesians 5:16 tells us that we have some time that we can use. Verse 5, chapter 5, verse 16. Making the most of your time because the days are evil. Do we make the most of our time? Are we wasting time? Are we not giving all the effort that we can? John 9:4 tells us, John 9, verse 4, we must work the work of him who sent me as long as it is day. Night is coming when no more work can be done. So we need to evaluate our time. How are we spending our time? Are we spending our time wisely? I can tell you that when I do my tour job where I take people up to the Arctic Circle, my day starts at about 6 o'clock in the morning, and my day ends about 3 o'clock in the next morning. And so I used all my time for that, and then I'm kind of wiped out for the next couple of days. So am I really using my time wisely? Maybe I need to reconfigure that a little bit. We all have abilities that we can share with each other. We can find that in Matthew 25 and verse 14 and following. Matthew 25, starting in verse 14. For it is just like a man about to go on a journey, who called his own slaves and entrusted his possessions to them. To one he gave 5 talents, to another 2, and to another 1, each according to his own ability, and he went on his journey. Now, I told my wife I was going to say this, and she said I couldn't, but I'm going to say it anyway. The one he gave 5, that guy invested his money in a Roth IRA. The guy that he gave 2, he invested his money in a traditional IRA. And the guy that he gave 1 to, he forgot he needed to have an emergency fund. So we know that we're supposed to do our ability. Some of us have great ability with finances. Look to your left and right and find those. Why reinvent the wheel when you can get that information from your brothers and sisters that are sitting to your right and left and can teach you what you need to know if you're having problems in those areas. We already talked about those who have talents that can help me become a better Bible teacher or can help me become a singer. I would love to be a song leader, but if you put me up here as a song leader, just know that I wasn't the song leader. You have to follow me, and you all be saying, you're off note on that. I know. I can't carry a tune in a bucket, but I will sing with all my heart. That's what the guy with the tracheotomy told me that in Kodiak. He said, Rob, you can't sing, but you sure sing the best you can. I was like, wow, that was pretty tough, right? Okay. We have the gospel. The gospel is here. We each have it in our hands. We have it on our iPad, on our black side of the force, Samsung stuff. We have it on our iPhones. We have it all kinds of ways, digitally. All we have to do is take time to read it and share it. It's amazing how much our little kids will learn just by listening to us and understanding what we're telling them. And you can find that in Romans 1:16 and Hebrews 4:12. Let us make up our minds to use what we have to further the kingdom. It's amazing when we think about God's ability. Often we say, don't put God in a box. I talked about that in a high school, the young boys class downstairs. That sometimes we get to the point where we put God in a box because there's no way God can forgive the sins that I have. There's no way God would ever help me out because I have been so bad. There's no way that God could do anything because I'm not worth saving. And that's just not so. There's no way that God would forgive me of what I've done wrong. That's just not so. We're told in the Bible that all we have to do is call upon his name and to pray to him and ask him for forgiveness when we fall short of his glory. And I told the kids, just phone home, E.T. And they all looked at me like, who's E.T.? Okay, different generation, that's all right. Maybe your parents can explain that to you. But in Luke 18 and verse 27, Luke 18 and verse 7. So let me back up to 26. Those who heard this said, then who can be saved? So he's talking about rich people and camels and the eyes of the needle and who can enter the kingdom of God? And so his disciples are asking him the question. Then they who heard this said, then who can be saved? And God said, the things that are possible with people, the things that are impossible with people are possible with God. So if we give our attention to God, if we come to him and honestly ask him for forgiveness for our mistakes, if we honor him with our lives, if we give him what we got instead of what we don't got, then we'll make a big difference. If you need any prayers of the church or help in any way, won't you come while we stand and sing?